they've done a huge amount of work on alternative options, all of their options, including Gyokeres, but perhaps the most was done on Benjamin Sesko over years, and that was really the feeling that we got from the club for a long time, especially that their recruitment department was keen to bring him in. Clearly an amazing talent with quality now and huge potential for the future, and some think he's going to be one of the best number 9s around, and it's no surprise that Arsenal and many other clubs have been looking at him. I don't know if anyone's going for him right now, and that raises questions in its own right. Maybe it's the finances involved with the sort of transfer fee expected of RB Leipzig and the salary requests and so on for this level of player. But clearly there seemed to be some sort of shift around the time Andrea Berta came in, and we've mentioned that he is a big fan of Victor Gyokeres. But I don't think he ever left the picture for Arsenal. It was one that they were exploring alongside Gyokeres and maybe even the likes of Watkins at the same time, and kind of bringing them all up to a certain point and deciding which one makes most financial sense to go for. And let's see if it twists yet again before the end of this. We don't have reason to think so right now, but you just never know until the ink is dry in these situations. But we don't know of anything advancing with Sesko just yet. And actually on The Athletic, I think we were very responsible in our reporting, because although there was a lot of noise about Arsenal advancing on Sesko, we never had that sort of concrete information to suggest they were. And it was about being patient and seeing what road they decided to take. In the meantime, they went for Ollie Watkins in January. They would have done the deal if it was at the right financial level. Aston Villa wanted around £60 million. There was no compromise on that. That was the possibility that they were kind of presenting because they needed to sell one of their strikers. Arsenal, I think, were willing to go around £45 million. It wasn't a negotiation. Villa said 60 or nothing, and so in the end Arsenal said we're not going to 60, and Villa said okay, we'll go and sell John Duran, and Villa kept Ollie Watkins, and now we're on a few months. I don't suspect that Villa's asking price is hugely lower, and maybe it comes down a little bit in the passage of a small amount of time, but Ollie Watkins is a top Premier League ready striker, England international. Yeah, he's at a slightly older age, but his numbers speak for themselves. His body is in amazing condition. He's a brilliant lad. He's being looked at by a number of clubs because there are not many players like him. And I'm sure Arsenal will remain attentive to that situation until and unless something else gets completed. Arsenal, in my view, they've just needed the finishing touch. And I know that's a really simplistic thing to say, but they had by far and away the highest XG in the Champions League semi-finals, a semi-final roster that included PSG, Barcelona and Inter Milan. They should really have won. I was in the Parc des Princes for the second leg against PSG, and the chances that they had, they really should have gone on to the final. And they were clear-cut, gilt-edged chances, many of them. And Gyokeres, from people I speak to in Portugal and around the game who know far more about this sort of stuff than me, and don't really have a skin in the game or a dog in the fight. They're kind of impartial observers, but have studied this player very closely, and others too. A couple of things that they say immediately. They say, his volume may come down in somewhere like the Premier League, but if you're still contributing, say, 15 to 20, down from 50 plus, then that's a return that could be absolutely critical to Arsenal, especially because they appear to have pretty much everything else in place in terms of chance creation and different positions that have been filled and are still being filled this summer. It really was that number 9, that finisher. I don't want to remind older Arsenal fans of the phrase "fox in the box," Francis Jeffers. So there's no guarantee, but a number 9, a top number 9 would fit that nicely. And Gyokeres has experience of English football through Coventry, and he's done it quite a different way to many. But there's nothing to say if Arsenal get this over the line that it won't be a great success. And equally, look at the price point that is being talked about here. We don't have final figures yet, but Sporting Lisbon seem to want a set fee of fixed guaranteed of 70 million euros and then some add-ons so that they can say they touch the 80 million mark. I don't know if some of those add-ons will be realistic and then some not so realistic, but they want to somehow touch 80 million. Convert that into pounds. And in recent years, we've been talking about Harry Kane, but he's one of the best strikers in the Premier League and the world, of course, but going for in excess of 100 million euros and different players in different positions. Yeah, different age profiles, like a Declan Rice in excess of 100 million pounds. Moises Caicedo, you've seen this summer with Florian Wirtz. There are midfielders who have been going. Martin Zubimendi into Arsenal is 65 million euros. And all over the pitch, you're seeing, like in recent years, fees for 70s, 80s, 90s million pounds. When you actually look at this for the productivity of a Gyokeres, and it hasn't been tested in the Premier League yet, I actually think it would be really good value for money. And that's one of the things we said. And forgive me for not mentioning this name earlier, but the initial target for Arsenal in terms of Mikel Arteta specifically was Alexander Isak. That was kind of his dream scenario. Well, that would have been going into the 150 territory, people have been saying 130, 140, whatever. And so when you look at it like that and you look at this potential figure, we did report in that piece in late March when we spoke of Arsenal's interest being high in Victor Gyokeres, that perhaps presents the best value for money option on the market. And if they get it and the numbers are suitable, I think they'll be delighted.
Yeah, I mean, Carl,
it's a crucial transfer window. Everyone is crucial at Arsenal, and we say this every year and twice a year. It does feel particularly pertinent given the sort of lack of trophies since the 2020 FA Cup, and this sense of external pressure building on Mikel Arteta to deliver, which I don't think is replicated internally. I think they're very satisfied with the progress that he's brought, and it is really tangible progress in my view. But of course, with Berta new in the door, he'll want to be making his mark, and he does do things differently from what we've seen. I've got to preface this with, these are extremely early days. You judge a sporting director over years, and that was a frustration that Eddie Howe pointed out about Dan Ashworth's departure when he was asked in a press conference, like, how do you assess his time? And he's like, it's hard for me to judge. We should be, determining that in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time, and it's not just on the pitch, and it's not just first team, and it's not just recruitment. It's off the pitch, and it's academy and women's, and the whole sort of broader spectrum. Now, I do think Andrea Berta will be focused mainly on first team matters, and you've seen news that James McNicholas reported on The Athletic about Arsenal promoting James Ellis to become technical director. Obviously Jason Ato left, so they'll clearly be delegating responsibilities in different ways, and Berta is renowned in the industry for working the market, being a bit of a trader, and he has come to Arsenal with a very strong reputation on the whole from his time at Atletico Madrid most prominently, but people who've worked with him from even earlier in Italy, and he came from a different background. It wasn't in football, was it? And so, of course, his methods will not be the same as somebody like Edu before, who seemed from the outside to go quite clearly for his defined target, and if they didn't get that target, which happened on quite a few occasions. You remember Lisandro Martinez was their top choice for that sort of left back stroke left centre back role. He went to Manchester United. They pivoted to Alexander Zinchenko. I'm not sure on Timber. I can't remember. There were a few examples at the time. There was a striker, I think in the January, Vlahovic. They didn't sign a striker. They ended up going for Gabriel Jesus. And there'll be many more instances. Whereas Berta seems to be juggling multiple options at the same time, spinning plates and manoeuvring, keeping conversations warm, such as right now, say, like an Ollie Watkins at the same time as you're pursuing your Cesco Gyokeres in recent weeks. The impression we got from the outside was that Edu was very collegiate in his approach with his deputy, Jason Ato, and others within the club. And maybe Andrea Berta, possibly because it's early, he's come from a completely different background. He doesn't know the guys inside the club yet. Seems to be better, but
Breaking news this afternoon. TalkSport understands that Victor Gyokeres' camp are confident of securing a move to Arsenal, and just coming through in the last few minutes from our chief football correspondent Alex Crook, he's agreed terms on a 5-year deal. Scott, just last week we were lamenting, when will Arsenal sign a striker? It was 3 years to the day on Friday, actually, since they last signed a striker in Gabriel Jesus. I refuse to say they signed Kai Havertz as a striker. If this gets over the line, how important is this for Arsenal?
Well, it was Alex Crook who said this morning that Arsenal have signed more goalkeepers recently than they have strikers, which is just incredible. It's massive. I mean, I've been saying for a long time, they're not silly. I think I said it last week.
No,
it will happen. They just want to try and get the best deal. You know, I know for a couple of years they're thinking, okay, can we get close to what many could say was the best English side we've ever seen, Manchester City. Last year was the one where, you know, that was meant to be their year. So this year's a big one. They didn't get the striker, as you said. Quite simply have to now. And it was just a matter of time. I know people were panicking and they haven't done it. And in an ideal world, and it looks like if it is going to be done in the next few days, it can still be done in time for the beginning of pre-season. I think clubs don't, maybe they do realise, but they don't care because the finances are more important. The importance of someone coming in early in a pre-season to get to know not just the tactics on the pitch, but the lads off it as well, whether they go away and they can have a bit of, you know, a few drinks afterwards and just sit down and get to know each other. It's so important, rather than signing at the end of the window and then expect to hit the ground running for that season. So I think it's absolutely massive. I really do.
You've played in Portugal. I've been surprised by the amount of football fans that have been turning their nose up at Victor Gyokeres, who scored 100 goals in 2 seasons, saying, oh, well, it's just the Portuguese league. There's not many strikers flying around. He's done his job. He's been banging the goals and he got a hat-trick against City. Surely this is a great coup, whatever the price for Arsenal, who need a striker.
Well, we know only top left-backs play in Portugal. I move swiftly on. There's no laugh to that. But no, look, I've heard you say that before a few times, Max, honestly, and you're right. Look, of course it's not the strength of the Premier League, and the depth of the teams that they play, there is a big drop.
Yeah.
But still, he has done it against the big boys, big boys domestically, the big boys in Europe as well. I think he's ready. He's prime, and it's just what Arsenal need. And interesting, you know, whether they did. I heard they were sort of lining up Sesko and Gyokeres and see which one they want. It looks like they're going for Gyokeres, and why would that be? But I do feel, and listening to Perry Groves as well, I get where he's coming from. He's a ready-made senior pro. What I've been saying about what Chelsea need, this is exactly what Arsenal need, because Liverpool have bought well. You know, City have bought well as well. We'll see how long it takes for them to gel. They were brilliant against Juventus, but then terrible defensively against Al Hilal. But I think they'll be up there. Arsenal cannot afford to drop away, and it's a big season for Arteta.
Well, this is exactly what I was going to say. We've got Martin Zubimendi through the door for Arsenal. We understand Christian Norgod's close. They're going to strengthen defensive.